You can't fix everyone. How to release stubborn people with grace. There comes a moment in life, painful but powerful, when you realize this. You can't save everyone. Not your friend, not your partner, not your family member. No matter how much potential you see in them, no matter how much effort, love, or patience you give. Some people are committed to staying the same, and if you're not careful, their resistance to growth will block yours. So the real question becomes, how long will you keep draining yourself, trying to rescue someone who doesn't want to be rescued? Because the truth is, you don't need to carry people who are perfectly comfortable crawling. Stay with me, because this speech may free you from years of emotional exhaustion and teach you the art of releasing with grace, not guilt. You see someone you care about headed toward destruction, stuck in self-sabotage or making the same mistakes over and over, and your heart wants to step in. You want to help. You feel like you have to. You tell yourself, if I don't do something, who will? You become the listener, the fixer, the motivator. You give advice, resources, time, and emotional energy. And at first, it feels noble. It feels like love. But slowly, that desire to help turns into emotional exhaustion. You begin to feel frustrated, disappointed, even resentful. You start to question yourself. Why won't they listen? Why aren't they changing? What am I doing wrong? And here's where the emotional trap tightens its grip. You're trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. You've poured into them so much, you've started losing yourself. You stay up late worrying about them. You're distracted from your own goals because their chaos has become your focus. You're walking on eggshells, trying to say the right things. You're always the one initiating, checking in, offering help, and yet nothing seems to shift. That's when you realize you've fallen into an emotional trap, believing that someone else's healing is your responsibility. It's not. It never was. Here's the truth that hurts before it heals. Some people don't want to grow, not because they're evil or broken, but because growth requires effort, discomfort, accountability, and they're not ready. And if you tie your peace to their progress, you will constantly feel drained and defeated. Because every time they fall back into the same habits, it will feel like your failure, but it's not. It's a choice they are making. Trying to fix a stubborn person becomes a form of self-betrayal. You sacrifice your energy trying to pull someone out of quicksand, and eventually you start sinking too. The most loving thing you can do, sometimes, is to let go. Let them walk their journey. Let them learn from the consequences they keep avoiding. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started caring for yourself. You're not abandoning them. You're escaping the emotional trap that was never yours to begin with. There's a hidden belief that many people carry deep inside, a quiet, unspoken pressure that whispers, it's your job to save them. This is known as the savior syndrome. It's the idea that if you just love someone enough, if you just hold on long enough, if you sacrifice enough of yourself, they'll eventually change. You'll be the reason they turn their life around. You'll be the hero in their story. But this mindset is not just exhausting, it's dangerous. Because it makes you responsible for someone else's choices. It places the entire weight of another person's transformation on your shoulders. And that's a burden no human being was meant to carry. When you believe it's your mission to fix someone, you begin to ignore the signs that they don't want to be fixed. You make excuses for their behavior. You overextend yourself, tolerating disrespect, repeated lies, broken promises, all because you're holding on to a future version of them that only exists in your mind. You're not in love with who they are. You're in love with who they could be. And every time they fall short of that image, you blame yourself, thinking you didn't try hard enough or love them the right way. But the hard truth is, people don't change because you want them to. They change because they want to. And if that desire isn't coming from within them, nothing you do will ever be enough. The savior syndrome also disguises itself as compassion, but often it's rooted in fear, the fear of letting go, the fear of failure, the fear of being seen as cold or uncaring. So you stay, you fight, you keep giving. But in doing so, you slowly lose your own identity. You forget your own needs, your own boundaries, your own peace. And one day you wake up and realize you've become emotionally bankrupt, all in the name of trying to save someone who never asked to be saved. Let this be your release. You are not their answer. You are not their source of healing. You are not responsible for their transformation. Let go of the pressure to be their hero and start being your own. That's not selfish. That's survival. One of the most exhausting patterns we fall into is confusing effort with impact. You tell yourself, if I just try harder, maybe they'll finally get it. So you repeat yourself, you explain, you plead, you reason, you do it all again, hoping that this time something will click. But stubborn people aren't moved by repetition. They're not waiting for the perfect wording or the right moment. They're anchored in resistance, and your efforts become background noise to them. The more you push, the more they dig in. The more you speak, the less they listen. You're not in a conversation, you're in a tug of war where one side isn't even pulling anymore. And every ounce of your energy poured into that dynamic begins to drain the life out of you. You start to feel unheard, unseen, and emotionally exhausted. But here's the truth. The problem is not that you didn't try hard enough. The problem is that you kept trying long after it became clear that they weren't open to change. You made your love and loyalty a reason to stay in a cycle that wasn't going anywhere. You mistook stubbornness for confusion. You mistook avoidance for misunderstanding. But deep down you knew. They understood you. They just didn't want to change. And that's a hard pill to swallow. Letting go in this situation doesn't mean you've given up on them. It means you've stopped giving your energy to a dead end. It means you've recognized that your peace, your time, and your purpose matter too. There's a difference between support and self-sacrifice. There's a line where love stops being healthy and starts becoming harmful to you. And the longer you keep trying to carry both your load and theirs, the more you collapse under the weight. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop explaining, stop chasing, stop repeating, and let silence speak for you. Let distance do what your words could not. Not out of anger, but out of wisdom. Not out of hate, but out of self-respect. You're not weak for stepping back. You're strong for recognizing when your presence is no longer creating progress and choosing to preserve your peace instead. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are doors to protect what matters inside. When you're dealing with stubborn people, setting boundaries isn't just helpful, it's necessary for your survival. These are people who often resist accountability, push against correction, and subtly or aggressively ignore your emotional needs. And if you don't draw a clear line, they'll keep walking all over you, not because they're always malicious, but because you haven't made it clear where you stand. Stubborn people thrive in blurry spaces. They test your patience, your silence, and your emotional tolerance. And when you keep giving without limits, they learn that your no really just means try again later. You have to understand that protecting your peace is your responsibility, not theirs. And that means making difficult decisions, reducing contact, saying no without guilt, choosing silence over arguments, or even walking away when the relationship becomes toxic. The challenge is that setting boundaries with stubborn people often leads to immediate discomfort. They might accuse you of being selfish, cold, or unforgiving. But here's the truth. Your boundary is not the problem. Their unwillingness to respect it is. Boundaries are acts of self-respect. They're not punishments. They are declarations of what you will no longer tolerate. And yes, it's painful at first, especially when you care deeply. You'll wrestle with guilt, you'll question yourself. But over time, you'll start to feel something powerful. Clarity, peace, space to breathe. You'll realize you were carrying emotional weight that was never yours to bear. You were managing chaos that wasn't your responsibility to organize. You don't set boundaries to change them. You set boundaries to protect you, because without them, you lose yourself trying to make stubborn people comfortable. You twist your schedule, your values, your emotions, just to avoid conflict. And in doing so, you sacrifice the most important relationship in your life, the one you have with yourself. So stop apologizing for creating space. Stop second-guessing your right to peace. Boundaries are how you tell the world and yourself that your mental, emotional, and spiritual health matters, especially when dealing with people who don't think it should. Letting go doesn't always come with closure, a thank you, or a clean explanation. Sometimes you have to walk away from people who will never admit they were wrong, who will never see the damage they caused, and who will continue to live in denial as if nothing ever happened. And that's one of the hardest things to accept, that you may never get the apology you deserve. But healing was never about their acknowledgement. Healing is about your release. When you deal with stubborn people, you often find yourself stuck in a loop, replaying old conversations, trying to make sense of their behavior, waiting for a moment that never comes. You imagine the perfect scenario where they finally get it, where they say, "I understand now, I'm sorry, I should have listened." But days turn into months, and silence becomes your answer. And eventually you realize that continuing to wait for validation or accountability is just another way of keeping yourself emotionally tied to someone who has already moved on, mentally, emotionally, or even physically. You can't force awareness onto people. You can't force growth. You can't force someone to see how deeply they hurt you if they've already convinced themselves that they didn't. And so you have a choice. Keep clinging to the pain, hoping it will one day turn into justice, or release it and set yourself free. Not because they were right, not because they earned forgiveness. Letting go is not about pretending it didn't hurt. It's about accepting that your healing doesn't require their participation. It's about choosing to move forward with dignity, even when they never gave you the closure you were hoping for. Closure is not something they give you. It's something you give yourself when you decide that your future matters more than their validation. And maybe they'll never change. Maybe they'll go on being stubborn, defensive, emotionally closed off. That's their journey. But yours is about freedom, about healing, about no longer shrinking yourself to be understood by someone who never truly wanted to understand you in the first place. Let them go, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom, because sometimes your peace begins where their presence ends. One of the most liberating realizations you will ever come to is that you are not responsible for someone else's healing. You are not the therapist in their story. You are not the missing piece that will finally make them whole. And yet, so many of us exhaust ourselves trying to be exactly that. We listen to their excuses, absorb their pain, try to explain their patterns, and believe that with enough patience, enough love, enough presence, they'll finally start to see what we see. But healing is an inside job. It cannot be transferred, gifted, or forced. And the longer you try to be their solution, the more you neglect your own journey. There's a deep emotional cost to constantly pouring into someone who refuses to receive. You become emotionally drained, spiritually depleted, and mentally worn down because you're investing in someone who won't meet you halfway. You might convince yourself that this is compassion or loyalty or love, but the truth is it's self-neglect disguised as sacrifice. You weren't created to fix people. You were created to walk in your own healing, your own growth, and your own purpose. And when you stop trying to rescue others, you reclaim the energy that was always meant to rebuild you. Sometimes we stay in these emotionally one-sided dynamics because we're afraid of what it says about us if we walk away. We're afraid of looking selfish, heartless, or cold. But what's more damaging? Protecting your peace or slowly destroying yourself to keep someone else comfortable in their dysfunction? You have to ask yourself, at what point does helping them start to hurt you? There is wisdom in knowing when to step back, not to punish, not to prove a point, but to honor the fact that healing can only happen when someone chooses it. And if they haven't made that choice, then all your efforts, however well-meaning, are just noise in their unready world. Let go of the belief that it's your job to carry them across the finish line. It's not. You can love people deeply and still walk away with grace. You can care and still choose distance. You can want the best for them and still release them from your life. That's not weakness. That's emotional maturity. Sometimes the most painful part of releasing stubborn people is not just saying goodbye, but facing the uncomfortable silence that follows. We live in a world that teaches us to fill every gap with noise. Text messages, calls, social media interactions, anything to avoid the void of silence. But silence, especially after disconnecting from someone who is a significant part of your life, is not an enemy. It is a powerful space for healing and rediscovery. When stubborn people leave intentionally or by your choice, that silence can feel deafening. It can trigger doubts, second guesses, and even loneliness. You might wonder if you made a mistake, if you should have tried harder, or if you're truly better off without them. These feelings are natural because silence often feels like emptiness, and humans naturally resist emptiness. But here's the truth. Silence is full of opportunity, full of growth, full of reflection. It is the quiet space where you can finally hear your own voice, your own truth, and your own needs without distortion. In that silence, you begin to reconnect with parts of yourself that were overshadowed by the constant noise of conflict, stubbornness, and struggle. You find the freedom to think clearly without the pressure to explain or justify your decisions. You rediscover your values, your dreams, and your boundaries, which may have been blurred or ignored while trying to manage someone else's immovability. Silence also teaches patience. Patience with yourself and with the healing process. It reminds you that growth isn't linear. Some days will feel calm and full of hope, and others will feel heavy and uncertain. But in those quiet moments, you're learning resilience. You're building strength to face the future without needing to control or fix others. More importantly, silence is where self-love begins to bloom. Without the noise of stubbornness draining your energy, you can prioritize your well-being, invest in your passions, and surround yourself with people who truly respect and support you. It's a sanctuary where you realize that your worth is not tied to how much you tolerated or how hard you tried to change someone else. Your worth is inherent, unshakable, and deserving of peace. Releasing stubborn people with grace means allowing that silence to be a gift, not a punishment. It's learning to be comfortable with being alone without feeling lonely. It's recognizing that sometimes the loudest growth happens in the quietest moments. So don't rush to fill the silence or diminish its power. Instead, embrace it fully. Listen carefully to what it's telling you. In that silence, you will find freedom, clarity, and a renewed sense of yourself that no stubbornness can ever take away. Healing after releasing stubborn people is rarely a straight path. It's messy, unpredictable, and deeply personal. Many expect healing to look like a sudden breakthrough or a neat resolution, but the reality is far more complex. When you decide to let go of someone who was deeply entrenched in your life, You are stepping into an uncharted emotional territory where old wounds resurface and new feelings emerge. This process can feel like a roller coaster of hope, pain, relief, and doubt all at once. Understanding this complexity is vital to nurturing your own growth and moving forward with grace. Healing is not about forgetting or pretending the hurt didn't happen. It's about acknowledging the pain, sitting with it honestly, and allowing yourself to feel it fully without judgment. When stubborn people resist change or refuse to acknowledge the damage done, the hurt can linger longer because the closure you crave doesn't come from them. It has to come from within. This means embracing your emotions, the anger, the sadness, the confusion, because they are signposts on your journey, not roadblocks. Each feeling you experience holds a lesson about your boundaries, your values, and your strength. During healing, you might find yourself reflecting on what you allowed and why. It's tempting to blame yourself, to replay moments where you feel you could have done better or been firmer, but growth requires compassion toward yourself, as much as it requires courage to move forward. Recognize that you did your best with the knowledge and resources you had at the time. Healing is learning to forgive your own imperfections, not just forgiving others. It's releasing the burden of carrying guilt or regret that only weighs you down. Healing also involves rebuilding trust. Trust in yourself and your ability to make wise choices. After dealing with stubborn people who tested your limits, you may feel hesitant to open up again or let others in. This caution is natural, but healing slowly teaches you that vulnerability is not weakness, it's a strength. It's the willingness to risk being hurt again because you believe in the possibility of genuine connection and growth. This doesn't mean rushing into new relationships or situations. It means patiently allowing yourself to rebuild from the inside out. Finally, healing is an ongoing commitment. It requires daily reminders that your peace matters and that your emotional well-being deserves attention. It may involve seeking support through friends, mentors, or professionals who can help you process and navigate the aftermath. It might mean creating new habits like journaling, meditation, or setting clearer boundaries to protect your heart and mind. Ultimately, healing after releasing stubborn people is about reclaiming your life on your own terms. It's about transforming pain into power and loss into liberation. It's the courageous act of choosing yourself when others won't. And while the journey may be long and winding, every step you take toward healing is a testament to your resilience, your worth, and your capacity to thrive beyond anyone's stubbornness. Letting go doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you finally started caring about yourself. So release them, not in anger, but in love. Not in defeat, but in power. Not with blame, but with grace. Because your healing, your peace, and your future are too important to sacrifice for someone else's refusal to grow.